Hello everyone, and welcome to our weekly webinar series. This week we have the pleasure of having Chris Suarez on the webinar with us today, and he is the MAPS group coach of our program Model Your Way to a Million. Just as a reminder, all of these webinars are free and they are recorded, so if you know anyone that you really want to see this webinar, the link will be sent out shortly today after the webinar, so feel free to share it and spread the word about our free weekly webinars. And that is all for me, so Chris, you can take it away.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Love the opportunity to get together with a group of our agents and talk about my favorite topic and ultimately a topic that our entire company is built and founded and our business model is really taken from, and that's the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book. And as Paige mentioned, I deliver a 10-week program through MAPS called Model Your Way to a Million. Really, that got built from a commitment to follow the model, a commitment to look at MREA as what it was intended to be, an actual model. And I think oftentimes so many of us have read the book, we have the book, right? We've passed over 1 million copies sold, so clearly there's been enough books sold for every real estate agent in the country. And yet it shows up in our world as just that, just a book. And much of that is because we read the book and we think, well, that sounds cool, but not for me. That sounds like a good way to run the business, but I don't think I can do it. I'm not willing to put in the time, or it's going to take too much money, or I just don't want a business that big. And as I really engaged with the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book beginning probably, well, my focus on it was about 7-ish years ago. I read it probably 10 years ago as I began to dissect it and realize that, gosh, if we just had an easier way to force ourselves into implementation of the models, we'd be in a lot better position, right? We have the book. We have people that are committed to building their business and running their business with it. We just don't see it implemented, and that's because it's a simple business model. It's just not easy. So really, the brainchild of Model Your Way to a Million was this commitment to, if we were able to unpackage this in a way that anybody that wanted to and were committed to could implement it, man, I bet you our industry would change, our company would change, our businesses would change, and it started with this focus on this quote on page 22 from MREA. Right? Gary said there are 3 things that are going to stand between us and success. And if Gary says there's only 3, I'm going to look at those 3 things
like listening in.
Okay. And focus on, hey Paige, I think you're I think you just need to mute your line. If we focus on those 3 things, and it gets us to success or pushes us into success, well then I'm going to focus on those 3. And this is what he said.
Go to the next one or extend the recordings. Just let
hey,
us know.
Hey, really quick, Paige, we can hear your phone. Awesome. I think she's going to mute that. So these are the 3 things. These are the 3 things that Gary said. Gary said it's your approach, your ability, and your willingness to do the work of real estate sales. Those are the 3 things that are going to stand between us and success. Only those 3. And I look at that and say, well, approach, I can change my approach tomorrow. If someone said, hey, do this, I'll do it. If I'm meeting with an agent, I say, hey, do this, they can do it. Then the next thing was ability. And ability I can change tomorrow too, right? It may not happen overnight, but I can begin to affect ability day over day over day. My ability can get better and better and better. So if those are the 2 things, then the 3rd thing is willingness. Willingness. And man, that's just me. Like, that's not approach, it's not ability, it's willingness. So if someone gave me the approach and someone helped me with my ability, then all I have to do is ask myself, am I willing to do it? Am I willing to do it? And I think ultimately, right, 2 are easy, 1's not so easy. We may say we're willing, but that's the one thing that we need to push on. Are we motivated? Do we care enough to implement these models? Because if we do, then it's just approach and ability, right? That's just the science of following a model. And as I thought about that and as I focused on that, I realized that if I was willing to, then the book, then MREA gives me the approach, and MREA will help me with my ability. On page 26 and 27, right? Page 26 and 27 of MREA, Gary says, here's the deal. Like, no one's going to live in complexity for very long. In fact, that's why most of us don't follow the model. It's because, right, I don't know, there's 359, 360 pages in that book. That seems complex. And unless we figure out how to do it in a very simple way, the majority of us won't. Why? Because on page 26, Gary says no one can live in complexity for very long. Lasting success always lies in our ability to reduce things to their simplest form. Gary once said in a mastermind with a small group, he said, here's your biggest business opportunity. Find a complex problem and create a simple solution for it. Well, that is MREA, except in a 10-week program, we're able to simplify 365 pages down into specific steps to begin to implement the model. On page 27, Gary said, hey, if it's not simple, it's complicated. And it's unlikely that anybody will take something complicated and make it work. In fact, you know, there are very few people in this country that can take something complicated and make it work. Not me, probably not most of us. So the fact is, we have to figure out what's the simplest way to run a business, build a business, and implement 4 unique, different, but connected models. So how do we do that? This word modeling shows up. This word modeling shows up. And we have to first take a step back and say, well, what does that word even mean? Because when we define it to ourselves, everything else, right, our entire program, Model Your Way to a Million, is based on our commitment to this word. So when we think model, oftentimes we'll think of, right, we'll think of the runway, and we'll think of a person. And why do we even call that woman or that man a model? It's because somewhere along the line, and that may be a whole nother issue, but somewhere along the line, we've convinced ourselves that that's perfection or as close to it, and we look to that and try to, right, I want to look like that when I wear that, or I want to look like that when I do my hair that way, or I want to, whatever the case might be. That's why we call them a model. That's why we call them a model. Well, Gary says in MREA that modeling is the pathway to excellence. Right? On page 35 and 36, he actually quotes Tony Robbins in Unlimited Power. And I've shared this many, many times. If I've met any of you while I'm speaking, like Tony said, hey, people have lived before you, right? People have lived before you. Long ago, I realized that success leaves clues, right? People that got specific results or receive specific results, receive them because they do specific things. So we look around our office or look around our industry or look around our city and we say, man, why isn't my business like that? Or I wish my business was that way. Well, Gary said, specific results. Well, then there are specific things. Actions are the source of all results. And to model excellence, we have to ask a lot of questions. Well, here's the good news. We don't have to ask a lot of questions because Gary did. Gary basically went out into the industry and said, hey, what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? How do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it? He went to agents that they're succeeding at a high level over a long period of time in all different marketplaces and said, hey, how are you successful? How are you successful? And sure enough, MREA became the compilation, right? The compilation of what the specific activities were that led to specific results. And I think the minute we internalize the fact that, hey, if my business is going to look like their business, if my business is going to look like the MREA's model business, then I have to be willing to model. I have to be willing to do specific things. And once I commit to that, then the only thing I'm going to check day in and day out, day in and day out, how's my approach? What's my ability like? And am I still willing? How's my approach? What's my ability like? And am I still willing? And as long as I'm still willing, then I'll continue to gauge what my approach and what my ability looks like. Here's what's interesting. For those of us that are like me, I just want to get into action. So I say, awesome, great. What 4 models do I need to implement? And I immediately jump to, I think it's page 129, where the models start, because I just want to get right to work. And for years, probably 2 or 3, what I skipped was the first 129 pages. The first 129 pages of the book, because I just wanted the models. And then I realized there aren't just 4 models of an MREA's business. There's a 5th model, and that's what I call the mindset model. The mindset model. I skip that oftentimes because I want tactical, right? That's just my personality. Tell me what to do, I'll do it, and then I'll tell you if it worked. However, what I realized is my thinking wasn't right about the business. How I approached MREA in general wasn't right about the business. How I approached the economic model, the lead generation model, the budget model, and the organizational model was not set up properly because we skipped 129 pages. So really in our course, we spend quite a bit of time in the beginning of our course, in the first 2 weeks, really dissecting the 9 ways the MREA thinks. And we won't spend a whole lot of time on it today, but I want to go through them really quick with you because, again, this is the foundational model. This is part of the science of MREA, right? 1, we have to think powered by a big why. I will tell you, if we don't figure that out first, no one is going to do the work it takes to get there. No one's going to do the work it takes to build a big business. And the reason being is because there's no reason to. There's no reason to. There's not a reason driving us to get through the ups and downs of building a big business if we aren't powered by a big why. And interestingly enough, the front of your book says the millionaire real estate agent. And honestly, I don't care if it's the $100,000 millionaire real estate agent, the $500,000 millionaire, the $500,000 real estate agent, the $20,000 real estate agent, the $5 million real estate agent. That's irrelevant. It's why. It's why that number means something to you. There's a conversation in the book on page 74 where an agent one day, it's one of my favorite stories in the entire book, so I'll share it because it's powerful. One day, an agent walks up to Gary and says, hey, Gary, why do you want all this money? Like, why are you still working? And Gary said, well, what do you mean? And he goes, well, you clearly have enough money. You don't have to work. Why are you still doing it? And Gary said, in all due respect, like, I don't work for money. I don't work for it. You, however, do. And the agent said, well, of course I don't, Gary. Look at me. Like, right? Like, I make about $100,000 a year. I'm happy doing that. And the rest of the time, I do what I want. Like, I don't work for money. And Gary said, be careful. Be careful, because unbeknownst to you, you may be working for money. By nature of the fact that your income has stayed constant, there is something either conscious or subconscious that as you get close to that income year over year, you may slow down. Or when you're far away from that income year over year, you may push. And that was condemning to me when I read that. Because I look back prior to a commitment of MREA and I saw year after year after year, a segment of my career looked very, very similar, right, in terms of total volume and total income and GCI. And I realized here I was for years telling myself and others that I don't work for money. Like, I love what I do. The income is irrelevant, yet my income was the same year over year. Unbeknownst to me, I was working for money. Right? Because as I got near the money that I had set as a goal or what I needed or, right, what I had to have, I slowed down. I stopped working, right? And maybe one year it took me 12 months, and the next year it was 11, and the next year, like, it was 10. Next year it might be 7. But at a certain point in time, I must have taken my foot off the gas, because if I was getting better at what I did but didn't see better results, then I wasn't powered by a big why. The first way the MREA thinks is powered by a big why. The second way, think big goals and big models. We need to acquire big habits. And that's why the book works for anybody, because it doesn't matter what the goal is. It doesn't matter what your income goal is. What matters is those big goals and big models will allow you to get to whatever level you wish to get to, as long as you allow your goals to drive it. Now, how else did these MREAs think? And keep in mind, this is a model. This isn't just a suggestion on how to think. This was hundreds and hundreds of interviews that Gary had with real estate agents, and he said, wow, these 9 ways showed up in every person that was successful. They had a big why. They thought big goals and big models. They thought possibilities. They thought through steps. What was possible? How do I make that a reality? They thought action, one of my favorites, right? Gary on page 84 of MREA says the problem with most is we assemble everything we need to pursue success, and then instead of actually pursuing it, we decide to go and think about it some more. Right? Who's raising their hand right now? Right? We just do that. We hide, he says, and I quote, they hide behind continual inaction while calling it something altogether. We call it additional research, we call it planning, we call it preparation. The reality is the top agents, the MRE agents, thought action. They got into action. They thought without fear. They thought progress, right? They realized, I often say, MREA is a process, not a project, right? We don't, and that's a problem for many of us because we aren't raised with a process mindset. We are raised with a project mindset. I'm going to do this and I'm going to get it completed by X. Well, welcome to the world of building a real estate business. We have to think progress. We have to think about it as a process, not a project that ends. Top agents thought competitively and strategically. And the last 2 are my favorite. And here's why. Because oftentimes we think as our business gets bigger, then our standards will drop and our service will drop. And what was interesting is the top agents, in the 9 ways that they thought, 2 of the ways they nonstop thought, they thought about this all the time, was thinking standards and thinking service. Thinking standards and thinking service. In fact, as their business grew, they were able to deliver better standards and better service. Now, once we start thinking or we have a mindset of something, our perspective changes. Our perspective changes. And the interesting thing, the difference between mindset and perspective, and sure enough, right, we're still in the first 129 pages of MREA. The difference is mindset, you know, we think about it, we act on that. Perspective is much broader, right? When we define perspective, this is how we approach not just business, but this is how we approach our life. And we spend almost a whole hour together in our 10-week course about these perspectives and how do we tactically make sure these perspectives are our own. Keller Williams does a phenomenal job. One of my favorite courses that our organization delivers is the 6 personal perspectives. And sure enough, right, the first one, committing to self-mastery. Gary said, right? In order for you to even touch the 4 models of MREA, in order for you to begin implementing the 4 models of MREA, you better commit to self-mastery. You have to be on this path of always getting better. Go back to that agent that said, well, why do you want all this money? Gary's end response was, I don't work for money. I work every day waking up, making sure I end the day better than I did before. Is that commitment to self-mastery? Absolutely. And sure enough, there are tactical ways to commit to self-mastery. Second one, committing to the 80-20 principle. I know, I get it, we talk about this ad nauseum, and actually now there's a whole book about it. However, the 80-20 principle, we'll camp on this for a bit in our course, and the reason why is time is the great equalizer. Time is the great equalizer. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter, right, how much money you have to start out with. It doesn't matter if you're beautiful, medium, or ugly. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters because time is the great equalizer. And so those who master time, guess what? Those who master the equal playing field will win. Time and the 80-20 principle is your greatest competitive advantage in real estate. So understanding how to commit to that 80-20 principle and breaking it down is honestly life-changing. The third, personal perspective, moving from E to P. Moving from E to P, moving from being entrepreneurial to purposeful. Well, welcome to MREA. I will tell you, and I was there and continue to struggle to be there, right? We are entrepreneurs. We love it, right? We look at this, like, look at your screen. You look at that graph and we say, well, when we think real estate, when we think someone that's awesome, don't we say they have good drive? Don't we say they have enthusiasm? Yeah, they have good intuition. They are naturally awesome at what they do. They're spontaneous. Yeah, these are all the things we say we want. These are all the things we say we want. However, interestingly enough, those are the things that are going to hold us below the success line. Now go look at what we need. Focus, strategic options, models, systems, accountability. My gosh, like, that doesn't sound exciting, right? What do we want? We want drive, enthusiasm, intuition. Like, that's the fun part. Then we look up and say, in order to get purposeful, in order to build a big business, we better figure out systems, tools, and models for focus, for strategic options, right? Models, systems, and accountability. Moving from E to P is huge, was huge. Next, perspective. Make being learning based the foundation of your action plan. I'll tell you guys, I gotta tell this to everybody, right? Our goal is to get people committed to building their business with MREA. It is the foundation of who we are. It's why we're here. And I will be the first person to say, get ready to work, right? Our 10 weeks isn't sitting back and listening to someone say, yeah, tell me about MREA. It is a working fast track course. And I want people committed to make being learning based the foundation of your action plan. Every week, we are going to be knocking out systems, models, and tools in our business to make sure at the end of that 10-week program, you can open up a binder or open up your laptop and say, here's my models. Like, here's my models. Now it's about implementation. Now it's about my willingness to plug into these models. You will build them in those 10 weeks. So we have to be focused on the action plan. What are we going to need to do along the way? Fifth perspective, removing your limiting beliefs. Removing your limiting beliefs, understanding what they may be, and dispelling those limiting beliefs. And ultimately, being accountable, right? Ultimately, being accountable. Accountable to what we say we're going to do. How do we build accountability into my personal world, my people's world, my lead generation world, my budget world? Every one of those models needs accountability. So those perspectives will show up again and again. And there's not going to be a week that goes by that we don't focus on one of those perspectives. In fact, I challenge everybody to look at these 6 personal perspectives and every single week hold one up. Hold one up, put it on your wall. Like, I will look to my left right now in my office, and guess which one is up? The one that you're looking at. Being accountable and helping others be accountable, because I believe that's the one perspective, such that when I master this one perspective right now in my world, a lot changes for me and for those around me. So we'll talk about those and talk about how do we implement them into our real world. So what's the next step? We get our mindset right, we understand our perspective. Well, MREA says we better have 8 goal categories. In fact, right in the beginning of the book, and I would say, as you look at your screen, how many of us track these 8? How many of us have goals for leads generated, listings taken, contracts written, contracts closed, money? How many of us have goals for our people? How many of us have systems and tools goals? How many of us have education goals? And how do we track these? What's interesting is, man, I missed this section for probably years. And then when I tried to really understand my business later on, guess what? Not tracking one of these or not having these goal categories really focused and zeroed in on, it'll create problems later. I won't know how to build an ROI. I won't know what my budget is. Am I winning or losing with my budget? Why? Because I haven't tracked leads generated to listings taken, right? Or listings taken to listings closed, right? There are things that have to be tracked. So we'll talk about systems to track these. We'll talk about how to set goals for the 8 goal categories. One of my favorite sections in the entire book is on page 69. And I think this speaks to us at different times. Gary says, you know, there's a work to learn phase and a work to earn phase. Here's our problem with our industry, right? The problem with our industry is many of us got our real estate license in, man, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, right? We get our real estate our license so quickly. And then what happens? Well, right, you join a company like Keller Williams, and actually, like, if anyone has a work to learn phase, we do. But even then, right, 30 days in, you may get your first check. And that check is amazing. For many of us, it's the biggest check we've gotten at one time ever. And what does that cause you to do? Do it again. Do it again. Do it. Like, we immediately go into working to earn. We immediately say, hey, I got a check, or I need a check, right? I got a check or need a check, and I need another one. So we repeat what we just did a second ago. As opposed to any other profession, right? And doctors, lawyers, even accountants, right? You have 4 years, 8 years, 12 years of working to learn before you ever go out to practice medicine or practice law. Yet we have 30 days of work to learn, and we go out earning. And that is the foundational issue in our industry. Gary's a firm believer that, man, if we create an MBA course around MREA, then we would have this work to learn phase such that exponentially our income would go up because we focused on learning. Now, I know that most people don't have 10 weeks off to just take and learn. The goal of Model Your Way to $1 Million was to take at least an hour out of your week for 10 weeks to work to learn, to be able to take a step back and say, hey, by spending some time learning, my earning potential will go up. It's interesting, right? I look at the first 7 years of my real estate career pre-MREA, right? Pre-focus and commitment to MREA. And then I look at the next 7 years. And I will share with you 1 year, right? 1 year now equates to 7 years of income prior. What did that mean? I was the guy that worked to earn. I put my head down and just knocked it out. I said, like, I'll work harder than anybody. And so by giving up my work to learn phase in the first 6 or 7 years of my career, man, it was hard. It was hard to earn. Then commitment to MREA showed up. 4 models showed up in my business. And now every year, we earn more than net more than we did probably the first 7 years of the business combined. This work to learn versus work to earn phase, if you go back to your book after our call, go to page 69, and I guarantee you it will get you ultra excited to join us for Model Your Way to $1 Million. So all of a sudden you get through there, and now what? Now it's understanding these models. And I want to just briefly go through the 4 models that we need in our business, no matter what. The 4 models that have to show up. And the first one, economic model. The first one's the economic model. Gary says, here's the deal. Everybody has one. You may not know what yours looks like, but everybody does. And everybody's will be different. We have one in MREA, right? This is the economic model in front of you on your screen. If you're in front of a computer, that's the economic model of a millionaire real estate agent. Now, through studying the economic model and understanding how it works, you will realize that business decisions you make absolutely change your economic model very, very quickly. In fact, if you're looking on that screen, in order to net $1 million, what does it come down to? It comes down to about 21 listing appointments and 21 buyer consults every single month, right? You do that, and you roll down your economic model as expected, and you're going to be just fine. But what we don't realize is the effects of our business decisions on our economic model. So now, sitting in front of you is, what does my economic model look like if I change my commission from 3% to 2.5%? We've had a lot of conversations about commission in the last 90 days to 120 days to maybe a year and a half as our industry begins to change. And that's a business decision each of us get to make. But notice, the original economic model at 3% had us at 21 appointments a month. All of a sudden, you change your commission rate to 2.5%. And what happens to your monthly appointments? 5 more appointments a month. 5 more appointments to me right? 5 more appointments to me a month is arguably, right, 4 or 5 hours per appointment, preparation, travel, presentation, post follow-up, times 4 or 5 appointments. All of a sudden, decisions in our economic model, right, commitments we make in our economic model begin to change commitments that you can or cannot make in your personal life. So we'll dissect the economic model intensely and figure out what is yours. Yours may be different than mine, may be different than the next person's, but we need one. We absolutely need an economic model. Here's an economic model of $500,000 net income. And sometimes we never build the economic model to realize that an agent that wants to net $500,000 in this industry, look at their commitment: 10 listing appointments a month, 10 buyer consultations a month. I look at that and say, gosh, 20 appointments a month, and there's 30 days, right? There's 30 days in a month. Then what do I need to do that? And if I'm not doing that, what am I doing with all my time? Because I sure as heck am working a full-time job, and sometimes it felt like I was working too. So the question that the economic model forces us to ask is, if I know $500,000 net income relies on me getting 10 listing appointments and 10 buyer consults, how do I get those appointments? How do I get those appointments? It pushes you into a lead generation model. That is the question the economic model answers for us, right? Once we set what our economic goal is, once we set what we want to net, all I care about is, well, how many appointments do I need? And my lead generation model answers that question. Now, here's the problem with the lead generation model. Most of us, in fact, I guarantee that everybody on this call, by nature of the fact that they care about themselves and education, I bet you lead gen. I bet you we do good at doing the activity. The problem shows up in our world that lead gen activity, which we talk about all the time, just doesn't turn into a lead generation model. And there's a difference, because a lead generation model says that it doesn't rely on our energy, our commitment. A lead generation model says that it's going to happen automatically. We can duplicate it, we can replicate it, and we can leverage it. So we talk about, how do we create lead generation levers, or how do we create lead generation activity to turn into a model? Now, the premise of the lead generation model is that we need quality and quantity. But interestingly enough, the quality is in the quantity. Gary says on page, it's 136, I want to say, that the octane of your fuel is irrelevant if you don't have enough to get to your destination, right? We find the quantity, we find the quality of our leads by nature of the fact that we get more and more and more of them. So we talk through, what do we do? How do we set up lead generation activity? How do we turn that into a model? How do we make that automatic such that it doesn't rise and drop based on our energy level? One of my favorite quotes, and it's a huge takeaway, it's on your screen: your database is your business. We know that. Building up the number of names in it, and here's the catch, and the relationship with those names, is really what the very core of building a business is all about, right? The size of our real estate business will be in direct proportion to what? The size and quality of your database. And that's where modeling comes into play, right? We can build the biggest database in the world. However, if we don't have quality, if we don't set up campaigns, if we don't have a system, if we don't have a model for that lead generation, then our business, even though the size of our database might go up, our business may stay the same size. So the lead generation model is one of the ones that we probably miss the most, because we feel like, man, I'm doing it. I'm doing the activity. I'm just not seeing the business go up. Check your lead gen model. So we'll build that together. We'll spend about a week and a half on building a lead generation model, testing one of them together during our course. Well, what happens when you have a lead gen model? The good news is we close deals, right? The good news is we sell houses and we earn commissions. The bad news is no one knows what to do with the commissions once they get them, other than spend it on fun stuff, right? So the lead gen model forces us into a budget model. It forces us into it. Now, if you've ever caught yourself saying, should I spend that money, right? Someone calls you and says, hey, here's this really new cool thing. This is what it's going to do. You'll get this many deals. And we say, should I do it? Should I not? Should I do it? Should I not? Should I do it? If there's a question, it means you don't have a budget model, because the budget model answers every question we've ever had about when, where, and how to invest in your business. It is my favorite model. I will be transparent and tell you the budget model is my favorite, and here's why. It takes so many of the questions out of your business once you have one. And I realized that even though I had a P&L, I had a profit and loss statement, what I didn't have in my business was a budget. I didn't set the expectation of where I was going to invest in my business and how I was going to invest in my business. So we dive into and understand the mathematics of our budget together, right? What is our seller specialist budget? What is our buyer specialist budget? What does cost of sale look like? What does operating expenses look like, right? In fact, what are our expenses in relation to the percentage of your operating budget? Understanding, those are a lot of numbers, but we will begin to understand why they are that way. When do they become that way? In fact, to take away one of my favorite pages on the book, page 157 of MREA, 157. This answers every question you could ever have about your business and your budget, regardless of either where your business and production is today or your business and production is going. Right on page 157, Gary said, well, here's the deal. I interviewed successful $6 million producers, $10 million producers, $15, $16 million producers, $25, $26 million producers, $40 million producers. And here's what they are investing. Here's a model for you to follow, such that I can look at my business if I'm a $10 million producer and say, if I don't have 12% of my GCI going towards salaries, then I am not investing properly, which means I am not going to grow relative to what the model says I should be doing, relative to how the model says you should be growing. Why? Because I wasn't willing to make that 12% investment. I wasn't willing to make a $30,000 or 10% investment in lead generation. So I go back. When you have that question, someone calls and says, hey, how about this? Right? How about spending money here? Hey, how about buying this zip code? It's very easy to say, you know what, appreciate the call, but see, I set my budget at the end of the previous year, and my budget's set for this year. So call me in October or call me next November. The reality is your budget will answer so many questions for you. Your budget tells you when to hire, right? Because your business will prompt you to fit into the percentage of salary that you should fit into. If I'm at 15 million in production and I don't have a $65,000 budget for salaries, then I may not be leveraged properly. Or if I'm at 15 million in production and I have $90,000 in salaries, guess what? My operations team may not be delivering the value they need for my sales team such that the sales show up. Are they providing value to our organization? And sure enough, your budget model forces you into building an organizational model. It forces you into doing it. Because if you have a budget and you're investing properly, your business will grow. And when your business grows, you will not have time to service all of it. So all of a sudden, the organization becomes important. The one thing I'll share, again, one of my favorite pages, this chart you'll find on page 167 of MREA, and it's the consultative interview. Your world gets very, very clean, very, very quickly once we implement this model out of MREA with every person in your world. And if you're a single agent, awesome, then you're doing this yourself or with a coach. What was my goal? How did I do? How do I feel about that? Right? That's telling. If I had a goal, and I know what I'm supposed to do, and I feel like, well, it's okay, you know, all of a sudden, I'm coming up with excuses. Now, based on how I did, what's my goal and what do I need to do now? Two more questions we need to ask everybody in our world. Hey, is there anything that might prevent you from doing that? And the second one, if you need training or support, what might that be? See, you won't go very far with the faulty or broken organization if you ask these four questions plus two more, right? What was your goal? How did you do? How do you feel based on how you did? What is your goal now? And what do you need to do? Okay, awesome. Is there anything that's going to prevent you from doing that? Nope, Chris, there's nothing. Great. Then my conversation next week should be different. And if it's not, remember, they've already told you that nothing was going to keep them from preventing them from accomplishing their goal. Do you need training or support? Great. What might that be? So the organizational model needs to be built, but the organizational model will be built just like you see on your screen through training and consulting. We will build a training and consulting organization within our own companies because we have to. Here's what we realize. Business is both a science and an art. Business is a science and an art. The art is the motivation and inspiration that we have around our business and what the energy we bring. I can't control that. I can't change that. In fact, no one else can but us. That's the art. It's different for everybody, right? I see one piece of art. I think it's amazing. You think it's junk. And that's fine. That is the art of our business, motivation and inspiration. But see, if we have motivation, we have inspiration to succeed, and we're not, it's just because we don't understand the science of our business. And MREA is the science of our business, hands down, period. Like, we have to understand and study the science. We have to work to learn so that we can plug that into our motivation and inspiration, our why. And once we do, then we'll know we're going through that path of modeling our way, right? Modeling our way to $1 million, modeling MREA. And in just 37 minutes or so, we did a crash course on, hey, what does it look like? What do I have to commit to, right? If I looked at any of those models, the mindset model, the economic model, the lead generation model, not activity, the lead gen model, the budget model, or the organizational model, and say, well, I don't know that I have that built out properly, then we're creating our own, right? We have just decided to create our own model, which honestly, I've done that. Right? I did that for 6 years, and I look back and think, man, my life would be different if I hadn't wasted the first 6 years. So we encourage everybody to join us, right? Join us in our 10-week sort of commitment to MREA, that community that we have to sort of focus and build out the 4 main models and the 5th mindset model as we go through Model Your Way to $1 million. That starts again next month. Questions. I said questions, and I don't even know that I can hear you if you ask questions. Paige, if you're still on the call, are they able to ask questions or no?
Yes, so I have 2 questions. The first is, can we get these slides later? And Jeremy, the answer to that question is, we will be emailing you the recording of this entire webinar. So the slides won't come out, but you can definitely rewatch the webinar as many times as you'd like. You will be emailed the webinar if you were on here today, as well as if anyone signed up and they were not on the webinar. And let's see. Looks like modelyourway.com does not work. If you would like to sign up for the group coaching program, you can go to mapsgroupcoaching.com, scroll down, and you'll see Model Your Way to $1 million. And then Gretchen, the question, is there an actual course we can take? Yes. It is called Model Your Way to $1 million, and you can go to mapsgroupcoaching.com, scroll down, and you'll see Model Your Way to $1 million, and Chris is the coach, and we are super excited about that. And it looks like it's just kind of basic, questions. So if y'all have any more questions, please email them over to fasttrack@kw.com. Again, the recording will be going out if you're on here. Bob just asked, the struggle with MREA seems to be that we get a snapshot of the mega agent's business. The Grand Canyon we face is how to get from 2 deals a month to 4 deals a month, so we have extra money to grow.
I love that, and I think you're right. Like, here's the problem. And was it Bob? Did you say the word you used is on page 3? I think it starts on 314 and 15, all the way to 340, and they're snapshots of a millionaire, right? The snapshot of the millionaire should just make us realize that, well, clearly it's possible. How? The how, right? There are three types of leverage, and that leverage answers three distinct questions, right? There's systems, right? It actually starts with tools. There's tools, systems, and then people. So my answer to that is this: if we don't have tools, tools answer what we need to do in our business, systems answer how we are going to do it, and people answer who's going to do it. So how, like, what do we need to do to go from 2 to 4? Okay, great. Well, how are we going to make that happen from 2 to 4? Awesome. Who is going to do it from 2 to 4? And I'll tell you, it's probably you, right? The majority of 2 to 4 is going to be you. The problem for us, most of us, is we just never built the tools and systems. So join that club, because I was a 6-year member of that club, and our commitment during Model Your Way is to, I hesitate to say the word force, but to encourage and hold accountable everybody to begin and to complete building those tools and systems. The struggle is they're here. The struggle is they are on, right, the first 300 pages of this book. They just don't get off the pages and onto our spreadsheet, or they don't get off the pages and into our day-to-day, or into our habit, or into our business. So I would say this: going from 2 to 4, that's a lead generation model issue. I mean, it absolutely is. In order to do 2 deals a month, you're lead generating, you're doing the activity, it just has not yet turned into a model. And I guarantee that that problem will be solved with the lead gen model. Once that model is there, guess what? Then 4 is going to force you absolutely to have a budget. And then you'll build out that budget model. We do that together. So hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, and Bob mentioned the aha today was the need to automate more of the lead gen. Right now, it's all about me dialing.
So the activity is there, which is awesome. The manpower is needed. That is lead gen activity. We cannot not have that. However, if your activity is getting 2 deals a month, that's awesome. Now it needs to turn into a model, right? It has to be duplicatable, replicatable, and leverageable.
Okay, that is, well, let me see. I have weekly. Jeremy asked how does he take advantage of this without being available at that specific time. All of the sessions are recorded, so if you sign up today and you can't make the live call, the sessions are recorded, and you can always go in and listen to those recordings and stay up to date with the program. And that looks like it's about all the questions for today. Again, if you have any further questions, please email us at fasttrack@kw.com, and I will be sending out the recording. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Chris, for hosting this webinar today. Such great content, and we hope to see you all next week. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.